$47 billion for a road? How do you even make a highway float? And is this just another case of Norway doing it because they can? Today, we're going to be looking at the richest's video of the $47 billion floating highway that Norway wants to build. Let's get into it. Let's do it. As a little bit of context, I'm an American. I've been living in Norway for about 4 years now, almost 4 years now. And I like talking about it, as you can tell. And I've never heard of this $47 billion floating highway. So I'm excited to learn what it's all about.
Norway is embarking on the largest roadway infrastructure plan in its history. In fact, it may be the largest road revamp in the entire world, with a budget of...
When did this come out? 4 years ago. Okay, let's look up, is this like done? Norway's $47 billion coastal highway. My consensus is that it's not done yet, which makes sense because it sounds huge.
$47 billion, this new coastal highway is going to connect areas of Norway that used to take 21 hours to travel between. It's going to bypass 7 different ferry crossings and cut travel time down by half. But how exactly is this possible? Well, by essentially creating the world's first ever floating highway. From state-of-the-art floating tunnels to how they're...
I mean, it sounds nice. It sounds very nice. I've only traveled a little bit through like that western side of Norway where all of the fjords are. I mean, it does take quite a while, but it's beautiful scenery. It's absolutely magical to drive through there. And taking a ferry to me was fun, but I understand if taking a ferry is like something that you have to do daily to get to work, it can probably get pretty annoying. So I could see why this would be nice. But Norwegians aren't so good with change or disturbing nature in a way like this. So this could be interesting.
Dealing with safety concerns. Here's a look inside Norway's ambitious new project. The almost 700-mile trip between the Norwegian cities of Kristiansand in the south and Trondheim in the north typically runs about 21 hours if you're traveling at an average of 30 miles an hour. That's over $200 in gas for a small car to travel just one way. Since 60% of Norway's exported goods are produced in the west coast, where a third of Norway's population also lives, there's a lot of traveling between cities to keep the country running. But with a new multi-billion-dollar road project, Norway hopes to cut travel times and the cost of gas to get there in half. With 7 different ferry crossings.
Okay, I could see why that would be beneficial. A lot of exporting happens in that area, so needing that to happen fast, that makes sense.
The way, getting around Norway is anything but a piece of cake, especially when you realize that each crossing can take about 45 minutes and cost about $16. Tourists may enjoy the scenic route, but those traveling for business or even medical purposes aren't big fans of taking the long way. This $47 billion infrastructure project aims to replace the ferries with bridges and to create conventional tunnels, as well as what could be the world's first floating tunnel to form the highway. The submerged roadway is essentially a pair of concrete tubes submerged about 100 feet below the water's surface.
That's wild. I've always wondered how tunnels are built. What do they do with the water? Where does that go? Like, it's always been confusing to me. So to build one that's floating now on stilts, I guess. Wild. Blows my mind.
It'll connect cities in ways they haven't been before and create new patterns of habitation for the people living there. These new roads will also shorten the path to reach hospitals, jobs, and schools, creating a more stable and diverse economy and a lot of happy commuters. Norway also hopes that the new highway will increase their population. Some areas, like Tysons, a region of rural municipalities located on an archipelago off the coast, have lost...
Tysonsøy, I think is what that was meant to say. Tysonsøy. Yeah.
over 50% of their population in the last century due to inaccessibility. The trend of population loss is continuing across Scandinavia. There are many benefits to restructuring the E39, but preliminary estimates show that the required investments and improvements will cost much more than the $47 billion highway budget. They estimate it could even be as much as 340 billion Norwegian krona or 38 billion US dollars extra. So why exactly does Norway want to embark on this crazy floating tunnel strategy instead?
That's like an insane amount extra.
Of just making more bridges? Norway has a few environmental issues with making roads. First, the harsh weather conditions can be unpredictable, with roads often closing and ferries having to cancel their departure last minute due to snow, heavy winds, or high waves. This leads to people driving for hours only to be turned away at crossings and forced to put their plans on hold. Norway is also home to many deep fjords, which makes things like bridges necessary, but they can have a huge impact on the environment and be unsafe in those harsh weather conditions. The best and most efficient highway is the one that's almost completely hidden. With this in mind, the innovative new design Norway is going with is known as a submerged floating tube bridge, or SFTB. Ariana Minaretti, a chief engineer in the Norwegian Public Roads Administration, told CBC that some stretches they have studied will have average-sized tunnels of about 5 to 6 kilometers long, while others might be only 600 meters long. She also explained that the submerged floating tube bridge was actually first conceptualized by naval architect Sir Edward Reed all the way back in 1886. It was proposed again in Norway in 1923, but the technology still wasn't quite ready.
1923. That's crazy. Something that now is so technologically advanced. They were wanting to do it in Norway in 1923. That's wild. That just goes to show like how long this country has been around.
For such a big project. Now, finally, the idea dating back more than a century is close to becoming realized. With bridges that span long distances, you need arches and suspensions at certain points. But for a submerged floating tunnel, if you do it absolutely correct, and balance the weight of the structure with the buoyancy of the structure, it can go on forever, said.
Why were there people walking in between them? What's the point of that? What's the point of people walking in between there? I mean, is it so you can like walk the span of it? That seemed crazy, right? To walk through the tunnel? Or is it just so you can like escape? Weird.
Niels Erik Anders Rogfast, a professor of structural engineering at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, who now works as a consultant on the new highway project. When a fjord is deeper than 100 meters or wider than 2 to 3 kilometers, the seabed is too deep for a traditional rock tunnel. Though the floating tunnel is buoyant, the tube itself isn't actually floating. The tubes are stabilized by cables tethered to the seabed, or by pontoons floating on the surface at roughly 800-foot intervals. The pontoon idea is likely the safest, because boats will be able to easily see the location of the tunnel. And with the actual
That's wild. Didn't even think about that. Boats, cruise ships, going over this tunnel? Ooh, that's kind of scary. That's crazy. And to have them just like floating with pontoons that you can see sounds a little bit scary and dangerous as well. Interesting.
Tunnel far enough beneath the water's surface, ships, boats, and even submarines will be able to easily avoid collision.
That doesn't look far at all. I guess 20 meters is far, but like, that doesn't look far. Giving me the heebie-jeebies.
The experts have decided that 20 to 50 meters, or between 60 to 150 feet below the surface, is sufficient depth to avoid collisions with water traffic, while also avoiding a depth that could cause increased water pressure. One of the proposed new tunnels is in Bonnefjorden, and it's called the Rogaland Fixed Link, or simply Rogfast. Construction has already started on the submerged tube bridge that'll be 390 meters deep and have a 27-kilometer-long tunnel, making it the deepest and longest undersea road tunnel in the entire world. A spur connection to the island municipality of Kvitsøy will be included in the design, creating a place where people can exit the E39 to enter a small village. Like conventional tunnels, the floating tunnel will also have escape routes that motorists could take to return to the surface in case of an emergency. The Rogfast tunnel will have emergency exits every 250 meters, 820 feet, along with emergency lights and phones at various intervals. The work on this particular tunnel started in 2018 and was expected to be completed in 2026 for a cost of $2 billion US. But with the project already overrunning cost estimates, it's now only expected to be completed by 2029. The government has proposed fundraising of an extra 1.3 billion Norwegian krone, or $145.5 million US.
Krone. Kroner? Krona? Kroner? Krone.
And they plan to put a toll in place for 20 years after the tunnel's completion.
Of course there's a toll. Of course there's a toll. It is Norway. So, makes sense.
Fee of 150 krone per passage for light vehicles. That amounts to about $16 US, which is about the same price it would take you to hitch a ride on one of those ferries.
Isn't that counterintuitive or contradictory? Isn't the road being built so you don't have to do the ferries? And you don't have to then pay for the ferries? Interesting. What do you Norwegians think about that? Because that seems contradictory to me. I'm not well versed in paying for tolls and seeing what those bills look like. So is 16 US dollars or 150 kroner a lot for a toll? I think it is. I'm pretty sure that's a lot for a toll. Let me know what you think.
The design for these submerged tunnels is definitely innovative, but with innovation comes a lot of brand new problems. Fires and explosions are a major concern, as escaping an underwater tunnel isn't exactly the easiest thing to do. Just imagine being stuck 150 feet underwater while disaster occurs. That possibility is enough to make even the most seasoned traveler anxious. Thankfully,
Yeah, I don't want to think about that when I'm in a tunnel at all.
Norway is already on the case to make sure their floating tunnels are as safe as possible. They have been testing small-scale fires and explosions in their tunnels to plan for cases where a truck is carrying dangerous goods or two large vehicles collide. They need to have a prepared and standardized exit strategy, as well as a response team that can quickly get down to the tunnels if anything goes wrong. Access for emergency services is absolutely crucial. The most challenging fjord to get right is the Sonja Fjord. At 3.7 kilometers wide and 1.3 kilometers deep at its lowest point. Nicknamed the King of the Fjords, it's the largest and deepest fjord in Norway, as well as the hardest to build upon. Experts are still evaluating whether some fjords, like
I believe it's pronounced Sognefjord. Sognefjord. Correct me if I'm wrong.
this one, are even suitable for a submerged floating tube bridge. While they may be in the process of creating these tunnels, research is nowhere near complete. The Coastal Highway Route Project is collaborating with 3 of the largest universities in the Nordic region: the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, the University of Stavanger, and Chalmers University of
Stavanger?
Technology. They have about 50 PhD candidates working on solving different engineering challenges.
Stavanger, if you're Norwegian.
Is related to the E39 project, including how to maintain the tunnels once they're constructed and make sure they never break. It's a lot of work, but figuring out all of these issues looks like it's going to be completely worth it for Norway. A continuous E39 highway that's accessible 24/7 despite harsh weather conditions will please inhabitants and tourists alike. Norway hopes that their new floating highway will be accessible to traffic by 2050. While this ambitious project might be the first structure of its kind, it definitely won't be the last. Engineers in Italy and China are already pursuing similar concepts. Now the only question is, who will finish first?
Interesting. 25 more years, apparently, until that is finished. That's a long time. So, what do you think? Is this genius or just the most extra infrastructure project ever? Let me know in the comments whether you're Norwegian, American, whoever you are. I want to know your opinion. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I recently found out that 99% of people who are watching these videos aren't subscribed, so please do that. It would mean the world to me. Because if Norway keeps building things like this, I'll definitely be here to talk about it. Bye.